Welcome to Know What I Mean. My name's George.
My name's Oscar. This is a rather different week.
Yes.
If you are watching, that will be very obvious. If you are listening, maybe not so obvious.
Yes.
Me and George are actually sitting beside each other in Brighton right now. This is the first episode that we've recorded in person, and it's totally different. Unsurprisingly, completely different.
Yeah.
It's like we've sort of trained ourselves to work in a certain way. So we usually will have notes on the screen and we'll be on a Zoom call, and that's a certain type of attention.
Yeah.
For me, it just feels like so different to be aware of you, the listener, at the same time as being with George in person, with eye contact, talking about things.
Yeah. Without the notes as well.
Without the notes. Totally different experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm glad, because I was kind of happy just doing the Zoom ones, but I thought, but you were really up for doing an in-person one.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that we did. It's fun to just try recording it in a different way. And yeah, it definitely does feel different. But I think it was a really good episode, and I hope people enjoy it.
Yeah, I think I felt more present this episode. I guess I was just aware of like the different setup.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
So it's difficult for me to actually recall what we even talked about right now.
Yeah.
So I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
As to how it will be.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely, and also it's one that has a really nice journey to it and a nice conclusion. That was something that I did remember.
Awesome. Well, we hope you enjoy it. Let's get into the episode.
So the quote for this week: outer achievements should be expressions of inner abundance, not compensation for inner poverty. This is by Sangharakshita. I picked a quote by Sangharakshita before. He's a Buddhist teacher, actually in the tradition of Buddhism that I'm experienced in, 𝗢𝗲𝗏. He's like the teacher. And I've mentioned a lot in the last few episodes that I recently transitioned to being freelance from just doing a general 9 to 5, and this just feels really pertinent, this quote. I think there's a lot of questions in my own creative process and creativity around where my motivations come from, and this has been a real question for me, and like cause of a lot of pain actually, of like what moves me to actually create. And being that I am now freelancing in mural painting, which is in a way like the professional version of, you know, my general creative outlet of doing graffiti and things, it's just come up again in full force of what is it that actually drives me to do this. So it just really feels current for me. So the two aspects of this, you've got inner abundance and inner poverty, and where that creative urge comes from. I guess I'll start with inner poverty, do the worst first.
Yeah.
My associations with inner poverty in regards to the creative process for me is looking for, like, having a really strong focus on validation, and really I suppose not in a way of just being seen in quite a healthy way, but in a way of putting my focus so much to the outside that a lot of my identity is wrapped up in how people respond to the work that I'm doing, and that actually ends up driving my creative process. Like what is successful, what gets more likes, and the thing that I actually focus on with Instagram is comments, you know, like what kind of praise am I receiving for the stuff that I'm doing. So outer achievements should be expressions of inner abundance, not compensation for inner poverty. So compensating, having outward reflections, outward validation for a sense of lack within myself is definitely something that comes up quite a lot for me in my creative process. But I also have had a lot of experience of it being a very pure expression of inner abundance. So allowing an artistic expression that just seems to come from a state of flow or a state of that I'm full and I would like to just express from that place. It's not nearly as much as I would like generally that it comes from that place. But that feels so different from when it comes from that place of like, I need someone to tell me that I'm worth something. I need someone to tell me I'm worthwhile.
Yeah.
So those are the two sides and the kind of basic view of this quote for me.
Yeah, because this is a subject that you've talked about a lot throughout our whole friendship. Like, obviously now with Instagram, but also just, you know, when you started off doing graffiti when you were like a teenager, you've had this process of kind of like, why am I doing it? And it has, you know, you have periods where it's more one or the other, and then you fluctuate. And I guess that's the thing with something like, well, I guess especially Instagram, like how that's just gonna, you know, you end up seeing these things as metrics for success. You know, it's so easy for that to trump your feelings of why you want to create the art, because you're just going to end up judging it based on, like I said, the comments or the likes and stuff. And it's really tricky not to do. Like, even if you've got a strong idea of why you're doing it, it's like the algorithm just incentivizes you to do what people want, like what is desired, or what people click on, or what people watch. And it's a tricky thing to try and balance that, and to try and, you know, choose, because you're naturally going to have times where where maybe you're feeling a bit more insecure or a bit more lacking in like the stuff that you're putting out. You know, like I've had it with like doing YouTube videos and stuff. There's been times where I'm feeling inspired. I'm like, I really want to, you know, make this just the best content and really express myself. And then there's times where I'm thinking more about like, you know, doing video styles that don't really appeal to me as much, but so that but because I think that's the sort of thing that's going to do well on YouTube. So yeah, it can be a bit of a tricky dichotomy between those two. With this quote, I was thinking about the achievements, right? So it says, you know, the achievements can come from two different places, from inner poverty or inner abundance. And I was thinking, well, is the achievement that it's talking about the same? Or is it that when you're coming from a different place, you create something different? Because in the quote, when I first read it, I felt almost like it was the same sort of achievement, but the intention behind it makes a big difference. But when I thought about it a bit more, I thought really the state that you're in is going to change the output that you have. You know, as a human, you have a certain amount of power and influence on the world. And based on your mentality of, you know, you could have like if you're feeling like, if you've got the feeling of inner abundance, you might have like a more win-win mentality. Like, you want the best for everyone. You want to find, you know, the best solutions for everyone. You want anything that you're producing and putting effort in to benefit as many people as possible. Whereas if you're coming from a place of inner poverty, you just want to be like, how can I get the most I can? And that's more of like a win-lose mentality. Like, you're like, right, I need to take something from someone else. I need to get something, and that's going to deprive someone else. Like, I need to conquer and take things, rather than like innovate and share and make things better in general. So yeah, that was kind of my main takeaway really from thinking about it, was just how we all have power, and that the state you're in really changes how you express that power and the sort of things that you want to do in the world.
So I guess your example of creating YouTube content that is conceivably going to be more popular for the sake of, like, you're making a particular kind of content because it's
Yeah.
going to be more popular, as opposed to making content that feels more authentically you.
Yeah, yeah.
That in a way you're diluting the essence of what you're doing by trying to make something that's more palatable, trying to make something that's going to be generally more popular.
Yeah.
So the outcomes are different in that case.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about the in a way, my approach to the quote wasn't that the achievements would be any different. I think that is true. Definitely they would be different depending on the state that you're coming from. I suppose the focus for me was that more like what is the motivation for creating the content in the first place. One thing I'm really interested in this area is a lot of the stuff that I'm the podcast I'm listening to at the moment. Probably one of the reasons why I quit my job was a very a view of, I'd say it's actually quite a capitalist view, but it's kind of an entrepreneurial view of that you can, in a way, it's your right to be creative and to put things out into the world, and you can make a living doing that. And, you know, it's just hyping that hype basically to say, all right, I can do this, right?
Yeah.
And a part of me really loves that and believes that. And in a way, I've taken a step into being freelance because of that sort of mentality. But I can't help but question what the root of that is as well. I feel like unless you've got some reflection practice, something a bit deeper, or a kind of spiritual practice, it might not be obvious where that sort of motivation is coming from. But it is something that I'd be interested to hear what you think about, in that, like, there's often this very positive view of an entrepreneurial spirit or a kind of capitalist, let's just capitalize on our skills and just make something, let's just like do something really important and become famous for our work and things like that. And that in a way is adopting this view outwardly of, no, this is just coming from inner abundance. I've got this creative urge and I just really want to make something, and I want to build something just because that's my human inclination, and I'm just a creative person and I just want to make something. Yeah. And I do think it's partly that, but I don't know how much I buy that as a motive. So in Buddhism, really, there's what's talked of as the three poisons, which are greed, hatred, and delusion. And greed can be exchanged with like actually just desire or craving. Hatred as aversion or pushing away. And delusion is, because greed, hatred, and delusion is the crux of suffering, and delusion is the lack of recognition of the other two. So in a way, this like, I'm just being creative from this sense of abundance could be a bit of a deluded mentality of not quite seeing that actually a large part of that drive is something which is saying, I'm not really there yet, I'm not really enough, and if I get to this point I will be enough. It might not even be that obvious, but I've just noticed it with certain stories on creative podcasts and things, that I just feverishly need to create, and I want to build something, and it's just this ongoing, like, I just need to be making, and I wonder if that is actually more on the side of a sense of not enough, and sort of a bit of a delusion of that there's not a recognition that actually I feel this sense of lack, and I need to just be chasing after this, building constantly and making constantly. And
I think as well it can, like, it is good to reflect on these things, but I think sometimes it's easy to get too caught up in them and like the ideals of what you should be doing. And often you can be creating things from inner poverty, and they can actually be useful to people and make the world a better place. I think that's something that I guess is somewhat, is not really expressed within this quote, but it's something that I believe that, like, a lot of people being insecure and trying to prove things, that does actually produce lots of new stuff and innovations. And the problem is that when it comes from an inner poverty, people may end up, expressing that through, in extreme examples like war and robbery, all of those types of things. But the ideal model for a society, in my mind, is to make it so that it's easy to be a good person, so that if someone does have this feeling of inner poverty and they want to, have achievements through inner poverty, that there's an environment around them that actually makes it so the things that they create through that are actually going to benefit people as well. That's built up more now with, say, things like reviews for things. Now, obviously, there's a lot of scope for those being fake, and that's kind of becoming quite a common thing that a lot of companies will fake reviews and stuff. But the theory in it really is that, like, if you're like someone who doesn't have an ethical bone in their body and you want to make loads of money, that through creating a system where things are verified and you can tell if a product is good, you can have these systems around where you can't have like a traveling salesman who comes to this place, rips people off, and then goes to the next place. If you can have these systems in place, then it can mean that people who are actually, not in a good place can actually provide things that are valuable to other people. So, that's an ideal more on a societal level. Obviously, within yourself, it's good to do what you can to come from a space of inner abundance. But I think it's good to be able to still do good things that are helpful and useful for people, even when you're not feeling like that. Because you don't want to be someone who's sitting around all day contemplating whether the thing they're doing is coming from inner abundance, and who just spends their whole life not doing anything. Like, it's better to just like try and do the things that you think are the right thing. Sometimes it might not be coming from the best place or the most healthy place, but I think it's actually often better to be at least doing something and making the world better in whatever contribution you have, even if it isn't always coming from the most pure place.
Yeah, that's a big question. I guess there are different places that you can come from in regard to contribution and the effect of the intention of contribution into the world. Because there is one perspective, which is that intention infuses output with whatever is behind that, whatever is within that intention basically infuses into the output.
Yeah. And
I suppose as a thought experiment, you can kind of imagine that, say that was the case, and that actually whatever was going on inside was totally infusing in whatever output there was.
Yeah.
And imagining that the consequences of whatever that output was would be then having ripple effects on everything that it comes in contact with, even if it was outwardly, say I created a piece of art that was definitely coming from a place of inner poverty. It was simply seeking validation from other people.
Yeah,
that's it. That somehow, because of that intention, when people come in contact with it, knowingly or unknowingly, will get a sense of that there's something wanted from them from this piece of content, that actually this isn't completely authentic, either they feel aversion to that content, or they feel like they need to kind of pander to it because of what it's requesting of them,
Gotcha.
because of what it's infused with.
Mm.
And what the consequence, again, like if you imagine that one person that comes in contact with that content feels the need to either push away or say, oh, that's amazing, and like, you know, give exactly what I was looking for from it.
Yeah.
If they then collude with that sort of attitude of living in a world where people are constantly seeking outward validation, they contribute towards that and give in a way that doesn't feel authentic to them, doesn't actually feel like they actually care about the content, but simply coming from a place that they know that this is what you want, so then they give you what you want. And that's not very honest in a way. It's not that they really believe what they're saying, it's that they are saying that because they know you want to hear it. And so then that's leading to a world where people are knowingly deceiving one another based on what they perceive other people's needs are in that moment, right? And even if that's like the most subtle thing, you know, it's like really small, it's still kind of contributing to this reality that is like diminishing. It's like kind of getting worse in a way. We don't want to live in a world where people are doing things that doesn't feel authentic or honest to them, doesn't feel like an honest expression to them. You know, you can imagine it with certain content that is very, very obviously like wanting validation. Like, you know, many people will have that response of feeling a bit like kind of I don't know, you know, I know what's being requested from me here, but you know, so either it's always going to be some sort of negative response however you then react to it, so that can then ripple out. It's like a funny example, but that, I think that is a perspective that you can take on it, is that actually the intention behind what you're doing, even though it seems fairly harmless in the case of validation, actually does have like negative consequences. And then you can imagine that in terms of when stuff's really got quite a bad intention behind it, not just that you want validation, but you know, you're actively trying to harm, or you are actively trying to take. And this perspective, you know, that's, as far as I understand, this idea of karma and the way that you plant seeds in the world as a human being, that's very much about what's behind what you're doing, because of that reason of how much effect these things have without even you conceiving of what that effect might be.
No, that's an interesting way of thinking about it. I guess I was thinking of more things like a regular 9-to-5 job or something like that, but even so, like those things are going to come through. Like, for example, like I work at a restaurant, so like even if you've got that feeling, you know, that's going to come through when you're at a table. Like you're going to kind of infuse that in it if you've got that, I don't know, resentment or something like that that's coming through. So I think that's a really good point, actually, that, you know, those things can be subtle, but it can kind of keep putting that out in the world. There's a thing, it was like a self-help thing that I heard ages ago, and it was about say you've got like a particular goal, say of running a business or something like that, and it was saying a good way to do it is, you know, you want to have your higher purpose of like, I want to do this to make the world a better place. But, you know, this guy was saying that, you know, you're naturally going to oscillate between these different levels. You're not always going to be like your higher self. So it's actually useful to write down some, you know, higher purpose ideas of, you know, making the world a better place, but also write things like for your like lower self or whatever, of like, I want to prove everyone wrong. I want to show people that like I can do something of value. I want to do this. I want to do that. And you can harness that so that whatever state you're in, you're still moving towards a particular goal you have. So that's kind of what I was thinking of as I was talking. But yeah, I think it's really important to be kind of self-reflective of these things and to try and make sure that things are coming from the best place. Even if you're not feeling the best, try and remember the things that you thought were important when you were feeling in a better state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because this quote is an ideal
Yeah. Yeah.
rather than real.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because interestingly, in my notes, I actually put down that there's a chance, I'm not completely sure, that I picked this quote as because this narrative of where is stuff coming from for me has definitely been a worse influence in my life rather than a better.
Okay.
Actually, reflecting on this has caused more harm than good, because setting myself up with this as an ideal has meant that it's been more of a tool for like self-flagellation and self-criticism than it has been of like, oh yeah, like where do I, I should come from a place of because the reality is that I don't. I very often come from a place of inner poverty, and when you're in that place of inner poverty, you don't need to hear that you need to come from a place of abundance, because no one wants to come from a place of inner poverty. It's not a nice experience. You know? So I think after I picked this quote, I was thinking, like maybe I was trying to kind of beat myself up a little bit with this quote. Actually, maybe because even though I think it's completely true as an ideal, and I do know the experience of both. Yeah. Actually, how much does it help me to be telling myself this, that I need to be coming from this very authentic, very just, overflowing with goodness, and that just overspills into my art. And, because that's just not, I'm a living and suffering being, and I do things for all sorts of reasons that are just quite primal and quite basic and from a lower self. And I've definitely found getting older basically, and like not being so gripped by these ideals, like having them as more kind of vague, like just, that's like they are somewhere, but not as like I need to live up this standard all the time. Like that, what's come in for me in a way of dealing with this isn't that, I realize I'm coming from a place of inner poverty with the work that I'm creating and beating myself up, but instead I'm coming from a place of inner poverty, and instead I try and work with that on a more self-compassion level. It's like, oh, I'm suffering, like I really need someone to tell me, that I'm worthwhile. Like, oh, that's kind of like it like more dealing with an inner child with that, and being like, actually, oh, that's very human, and like kind of sad, not in a like a in a mean way, but just like like okay, you need a bit of like comforting then. Not, you don't need to be told like fucking you should be coming from abundance. But like, like instead that, oh, okay, you need to give yourself a bit of a break then.
No, I think that's really important to emphasize, because it is, and it did feel a bit like that, the quote reading it, whenever, I think we've talked about the word should on here before, it can be quite a tricky word really, because it really is, you should be doing this, and obviously the implication is you're wrong if you're not doing this, and like you said, how you're kind of punishing yourself, making yourself feel bad if you weren't living up to this standard. So I think, I don't know, maybe if it was more like like the best achievements come from inner abundance or something. Like that's that, at least to me, and I at least to me that feels more positive, of like a positive thing that you can live for, and you can try and be like, oh yeah, this is what I'm striving for, rather than like, this is bad when you're like this. Because I think it is really important, those just like it's one thing I've realized is like very subtle differences in language can have a huge difference on emphasis of where you direct your attention, where you focus. like it's something I've learned from studying hypnosis, is just how much impact those tiny little switches in how things are said, and how those things are said, either if it's something that you say repeatedly, something you say to yourself a lot, or if it's something that's said in a very peak experience, any time where like your emotions are really ramped up, like a huge, I don't know, something someone says to you like at a job interview, or getting fired from your job, or like any really big pivotal moment, or like a car crash. Like words can really make a huge difference. I've definitely found on this podcast that there's some quotes, I can't remember the particular one, but there was one before where I was thinking like, this is an interesting one to explore, but it's definitely not a good one to repeat to yourself. And that's definitely been the case for a few of the quotes, of like it's a really cool to dive into, but you don't want to actually live by this quote. You want to actually think about what is a quote that's gonna lead me and inspire me to do better and to be happier.
And yeah, I guess that's the case with this quote, is it's a point of reflection, definitely, because I think it is interesting to question what your motives are and where you come from with things.
Yeah, for sure.
And at the same time, particularly in one of the places, of inner poverty, this isn't the quote that you'd want to read, and it's not one that you'd want to have on your wall or in your background, because it's not actually going to help you out of that situation. It's not going to encourage you, because you can't will yourself into a place of inner abundance. It's one you look at and you think that is true, and then maybe put down, put somewhere else, put away for a while.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I've got a quote for next week. Every person's map of the world is as unique as their fingerprint. And that's another quote from Milton H. Erickson. I think we've already had at least one from him.
Two.
We've had two?
I think so.
Oh, damn. Well, there you go. Here's another one. Yeah.
If you've enjoyed this episode, it would mean so much for you to share it with someone you love.
Yes.
That's it.
Cool. All right. Enjoy the rest of your week, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Smooth.